Hey, we're super excited to introduce our next guest, Mike Watts with Alta and Flo2Plus. He's going to talk about breathing your way into being a better leader. He starts with his story from the professional sports world, primarily soccer. He's British. He calls it football. We'll get him straight later down the road. But he talks about how he began as a high-end trainer for pro sports teams there, and then went from almost more of a physical trainer, an exercise physiologist, into the breath work and the mindfulness and his journey into realizing that these people at the top really have more room to grow if they can get that mind-body connection better. He uses breathwork as the vehicle for it. He gives the science behind it. And then most importantly, I really think for anyone listening to this is some simple, concrete tools you can apply today. And then if you listen to the science part, you can impress everyone at the next cocktail party you're at with how breathwork works there. One of my favorite pieces, just because I'm a leadership geek, is he's had all this exposure to these different coaches and high-end athletes. He shares one of the leaders that really stands out in his mind and why, and it just resonates so strongly with me because take away the sport aspect, you could drop that person in any environment and they would excel as a leader and impact those around them. So without further ado, Mike Watts with Flo2Plus and Alta going to share with us, hey, how to breathe your way into being a better leader.
Yeah, I'm good. Yeah.
Hey, so Mike, thank you so much for linking up today. Pretty epic afternoon here, but just taking time out of your busy schedule to just kind of talk about your background and what you do and how it applies to life, leadership, performance, and beyond. I just think it's worth mentioning like how we connected, which was it's almost a year ago now. You came out to one of StoneWater's programs, is the Adaptable Leader Program. We're getting ready to run it again in February, and that was kind of the start of this. And, you did your presentation there on, hey, how breath work can, help induce control. So totally looking forward to this. Really appreciate it. Before we get into it, man, tell us a little about your story. Like, how'd you get to where you are now?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first and foremost, thanks for having me on, Phil. So my story, the older I get, the longer the story gets, so I'll try and keep it brief.
The older I get, like the better I was. So I know how that goes.
So I'm by trade, I would say I'm an exercise scientist, human performance expert. Kind of been in the field for 20 odd years now. My sort of story began in pro sport really, as we were called fitness coaches way back. For a football team or soccer team, as you would call it.
Yeah, I was going to say, so you have a bit of an accent. So are you Canadian or from Colombia? I'm just trying to place it.
Close, yeah. Are you Australian or South African? No, I'm from England, so the East Midlands originally. And I was kind of just doing my thing in England at this point. I was working in the health and wellness space in a fitness gym. So I had some background in training people. And I was approached to go and work out in China and take a senior professional football team, soccer team, with their fitness and performance. So I jumped at it. I knew the sport. I was comfortable with the sport, but I had no idea what I was doing in terms of the craft of training professional athletes, recovering professional athletes. I had no idea. So I went out there, and it was a 2-month assignment, and I had 2 years. It was pretty successful. We got promoted. Ended up working with the national team, but I had a sense of like I needed to get back to Europe in order to develop my education and find someone who would mentor me in a way, because I was out there in an island, nobody spoke English, all my education was really coming from reading books, and I don't even know if YouTube existed at that time, like in the early 2000s. So I had this desire to come back, and I came back, and then I did my master's in sport and exercise science, and I was working full-time in pro soccer at that time.
And quick question. So up to this point, it was all kind of physical performance. It was like training, technical skills, kind of more a fitness approach to these professional athletes?
Yeah, so I would class it as a very traditional approach to performance, which still exists to this day, and it very much looks at, okay, we're going to do some stuff on the field, some speed work and some agility. We're going to do some strength work in the gym, and then we'll give them a protein shake and chuck them in an ice bath. That was pretty much it. But because I was in China, I was seeing things that now I reflect back, I was like, I wish I'd asked more. I was seeing acupuncture. I was seeing like strange treatments and concoctions and just very much like Eastern medicine. But as a 23, 24-year-old, it sort of went over my head at that point. So I came back, UK. I'm continuing my development of my craft. I'm now at Sheffield United with the academy and with the first team. I'm at college 1 day a week, doing my masters, 3 years, and then I moved to another pro soccer team, got a job for Norwich City, solely with the seniors, 3 years there, very successful time, promotion to the Premier League. And then I get headhunted again, and I go to Aston Villa, a really big club in Europe, and spend 3 years there, and also work for the women's national team. So I've had a really good run at this point in professional soccer.
So, like, did you ever meet Ted Lasso in all your days?
No, never saw him. He came after me. Okay. So yeah, never got to meet him.
Just had to check. I mean,
Yeah.
that's where my knowledge of English soccer goes. I'm like, I recognize Premier League and, these different names. Yeah, I'll go back and watch it again so I have more context.
Exactly. So one of my biggest strengths, I think, is curiosity. And I'm kind of sort of coming to America once a year to continue some development or do some work with one of the brands. And I meet this guy, a guy called Paul Winsper, and he's head of performance at Under Armour. He says, I'm trying to build this centre, would you join me? And we'll train these athletes, blah, 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 like painting this vision. And I was like, yeah, I'm in. So I chucked it in and moved my family over to the US. And that was a huge inflection point for me, where I moved from what I would call athlete performance to human performance. I started to understand the real importance of how we sleep, how we think, how we nourish ourselves, how we move, the people that we spend time with, community, recovery, and of course, how we breathe. And it started to change my opinion. And now I'm working with athletes around basketball. I'm working with judo. I'm working with boxing. I'm working with speed skating, track and field. And I see this red thread that's running through every single person is, if I can try and attend to some of these health and wellness outcomes, it actually improves their craft and their sport. And we can train the mind and the body. And I start to really get sort of laser focused on how to sort of improve their health and wellness, because these athletes have been training in the gym, on the field, their entire career. They've kind of maxed out that sort of criteria, but there's this huge white space where they don't sleep well, they don't eat well, they don't think well, they don't move well, they don't breathe well. And then you're starting to think, well, if I start to level up in those areas, what does that mean for them in terms of athlete longevity, in terms of immediate performance? And I start to find some amazing outcomes. Had 6 great years at Under Armour, really developed myself personally, professionally, education as well, did another degree in nutrition, sports performance, did my manual therapy course. And then I got this opportunity to work at a startup company that was basically trying to pull this philosophy together that I'd been working on for the last 20 years of, can we take somebody's data, DNA and biometrics, and recommend personalized outcomes to health, wellness and fitness. And it was breathwork and yoga and meditation and strength work and cardio work, and I was all in. So I'm doing that now, and we're about to launch. That's called Alter, which is an amazing project. And then I also have my own business, Flo2Plus, which is very much focused on recovery, movement and breathing. And we're really looking at these fundamentals to say, whether you're an athlete, a CEO, or just a normal person trying to navigate life, if we can start to attend to these things and really understand the nervous system, then we can really, really help you perform to your optimal in your life.
Yeah, I'm actually really glad you brought that up about Alta and Flo2Plus. And that's how we initially were talking, specific to Flo2Plus, but that it's not just for professional athletes or people striving purely in the physical athletic performance, but it's this holistic package. Like, humans are a unit. It's the brain, it's the heart, it's the breath, it's the body, and they all influence each other. And I think it's real easy to get fixated on the physical piece because it's very quantifiable.
Yeah.
I know when I'm faster, I know when I'm stronger, but I think we overlook the breath work, the mental piece. And I feel like the breathing is that connection between the body and the mind. And, part of the reason why I want to talk to you is just, hey, you brought up like CEO example, and you've clearly worked with athletes under stress and pressure. Is sort of exploring that further, going, yeah, so what is it about the breath work and the mental work? Like, where do you see the strength and power in that, especially as it pertains to people who, again, to your point, whether it's trying to raise kids, like in the 7 people behind Carlos as he films this, or, trying to make some high pressure deal with business, like, how do you see that all integrating?
So I think the beauty of breathwork is that it's probably one of the only things that really connects the mind and the body. And I'll often say to people, how you think will dictate how you breathe, and how you breathe dictates how you think. And when we sort of unpack that and say, well, what does that actually mean? We understand nervous system states, and maybe we'll go into polyvagal theory a little bit, but in a very binary sense, we can be stressed or we can feel more calm and relaxed. And when you look at someone who's in a stress state, they'll be breathing fast, they'll be breathing noisy, they'll be breathing with their chest and probably using their mouth. And on the flip side, you look at someone who's more calm and relaxed, it's quiet, it's slow, it's deep, and it's with the nose. So you've kind of got these polar opposites of breathing, which are attached to a state of somebody's nervous system. So I think there's multiple ways to approach this, of thinking, okay, I can now start to think about, can I build some resiliency in my breath work in order to have a better command? And I can also start to think about what tools, what techniques can I use to shift state? So when I feel stressed, can I feel more calm and relaxed? When I feel a little bit shut down, can I feel a bit more engaged? So breathwork is a real key to help us build resiliency for health and wellness, but then also to help us navigate and change states with intention and skill.
No, I love it. So you've talked a lot about kind of your specialty, and we know it's good, but like how is it good in layman's terms? Because I don't have multiple degrees, and I'm just going to be, full disclosure, when I talk to you, Mike, I become very conscious how I breathe, and I'm like, is he judging me how I'm breathing? I'm like, am I going through my nose? Am I slow? Oh my God, I'm breathing too fast. And then I panic and I breathe terrible around you. So don't judge me. This is just because, there's unseen pressure here. But I'm going to go back to breathing really good now.
Okay.
And let you answer that.
Well, you're not alone there. Like, there was a recent study around 1,500 athletes from high school up to pro. 95% had some kind of dysfunctional breathing trait. So then it starts to put us in this situation where it doesn't matter who you are, there's a very good chance you're going to have a dysfunctional breathing trait, whether you're a professional athlete, CEO, or the general person. So why does it matter? Why does breathing matter to us, and why is it so important? We do it 20,000 times per day. It's the first thing we do when we enter the world and the last thing we do when we leave the world. And basically, if you stop breathing, that's not good for you. So it's very, very important.
Yeah, I hate not breathing.
I hate not breathing, and unless I'm doing it consciously for a purpose. And we maybe get to that. But then I think to myself, okay, I'm doing something so many times per day, I might as well try and optimize this to help my health, wellness, and performance. So when we look at breathwork and breathing, we talk about dimensions. We have what we would call more the biomechanical dimension, with more of our muscles. We've then got the biochemical, which is the exchange of gases, oxygen, very important again. And then the psychophysiological, which is our mind-body connection. Very briefly, let's talk about benefits. If I can breathe deeply and utilize the biomechanics and use my diaphragm properly, it's going to stabilize my spine. It's going to reduce back pain, neck pain. It's going to improve movement efficiency. All good things. Then I think about the biochemical side. Oxygen, critical. Tissue, cells, the brain needs oxygen to survive and live. If I have a normal response to carbon dioxide, which most people say, okay, I've got to breathe that out and get rid of it. We don't want to get rid of too much. If I have a normal response and I can diffuse oxygen to my cells and tissue, that's a great thing for me. I can also generate nitric oxide. We talk about vasodilation and constriction, where the blood vessels either tighten up or open. Very, very important. Nasal breathing increases that sort of dilation of our blood vessels. And then we talk about the psychophysiological side, thinking about the brain, and we go back to that nervous system response. So the autonomic nervous system is a proxy into our fight or flight response, rest and digest. So through breathwork, I can strengthen it, and then I can also navigate on the map in terms of stress to relaxation, relaxation to stress. So the benefits to breathing properly are very, very widespread. Help with focus, help with sleep, help with recovery, help with performance, more oxygen to cells and tissue, better stabilization of the spine, strengthening of the nervous system, lung volume, reducing breathlessness. Like the list goes on and on and on and on. And when I first saw the research, and really Patrick McKeown was a guy who educated me in this area and really got me excited about breathwork, I was very, very skeptical. As a performance scientist, I was like, there's no way breathing can do all this. And as we start to explore the research, there is so much evidence to breathing properly for your health, your wellness and your performance. But like anything, it's not a given, and you have to work on it, and you have to bring some consciousness back to your breathing patterns in order to build and sort of go and explore.
Yeah, so I mean, in essence, you're saying, hey, focus breath work. Obviously, oxygen's great. We all like it. Breathing's kind of one of the more natural things we do as humans. You're saying, but there's room to improve for 95% of the population based on that study. And the benefits go everything from kind of physiological to emotional to mental, your ability to focus and transition and tap into different states for optimal performance. We've talked about this, I think, a little bit before, and I was even sharing before we started recording, from my background in the special operations community, it was, I'd say, from probably about 2015 on, starting to become a bit of a thing. As people were, I don't know if I'd say quite on the level physically of pro athletes, but at the top of their respective fields, and people are going, well, where does the untapped advantage lie? It's a life and death game. We want to make sure we're doing our best. It's for a higher cause, greater than ourselves. What can we do to elevate? And breathwork started to come out as one of the things. And, there was a few different theories. None of us really quite understood the why. We just were like, okay, this is good, do it. And, I think a lot of things, I love that you explain the why, because when you know why you do something, it's a lot more easier to convince yourself to do it, other than I'm doing it and I hope it works. I think something for me is, when you get in that stress state, you've spent a ton of your life working with athletes who have to perform under pressure, but then you started to see that transition to normal people doing normal jobs. And I think, so many of us find ourselves in a reactive emotional state, and then we say and do things that we're like, that's not who I wanted to be in the moment. And I think there's certain aspects of breath work that can help alleviate that. I mean, do you have some recommendations or tools that you're like, hey, if you forget everything else, next time you feel yourself getting amped, try this?
Yeah. So I think before we get into the how, maybe like to rewind and get into the why. So if we go back to that nervous system state, and you say like, before I go too far, when I'm feeling a little bit triggered, and this really comes back into like the nervous system or polyvagal theory, and it's really understanding where you are on the map. So if you think about a Venn diagram, you take 3 circles and you kind of align them. You can sort of visualize that. One of them is what we would call a sympathetic driver. You're mobilized, you're in fight, you want to kill someone, or you want to punch somebody, or you're in flight, you feel a bit scattered. Maybe you can't concentrate and you feel like you want to move. They both live in a sympathetic drive, but they're slightly different. You've probably felt those things. Then we have what we would call...
Yeah, I have 6 teenagers at my house right now. I live in that Venn. I live in that circle.
There you go. And I think it's important to understand the difference between fight and flight. They're 2 very different things. And Phil, from your background, that they are 2 very different things. You're either engaged or you're probably wanting to try and get away. And it's the same physiological response, but it leads to a different outcome. Then we have shutdown mode. Shutdown mode is part of our parasympathetic drive.
This is the second circle in the Venn diagram.
Yeah.
Okay.
And this is what we call more of our dorsal vagal. So think about as a reptile, we would have this kind of evolution. So I'll give you a really good example of shutdown. You take a crocodile, it's probably got two branches of this nervous system. It's got fight and it's got shutdown. Sits parasympathetically in the water, immobilized, conserving resources, not doing anything. Sees something it wants to kill, jumps straight into sympathetic, goes and rips its head off, death roll, and then when it's done, it goes back, and it's bouncing between the two. It's all it's got. Then we take another circle, the third circle, and this is more of our ventral vagal, our front side, something we developed as mammals. The reason we developed it was so we could socially build community. Understanding we weren't the apex predator, we needed numbers to survive and thrive, and really this became part of our safety system. So in this state, you feel calm, you feel safe, you feel relaxed. So now you think, okay, I've got like 3 circles with 4 states. So where do I lie? And there can be hybrid states where you're sort of crossing over. So I think before you go to the like action is like, where am I on that? And to your point, most people will say, I'm in that sympathetic drive of, I want to rip somebody's head off, or I just cannot be still, or I cannot focus, I'm super scattered. Your nervous system has been sympathetically driven. Sympathetic drive leads to an increase in heart rate, increase in respiratory rate, your breathing starts to speed up. You're more likely to want to breathe with your mouth, more likely to breathe with your chest. You start to release a bunch of hormones that are like a stress response, such as cortisol, epinephrine, norepinephrine, etc., etc. So you're moving towards this physiological, psychological state of stress. Recognize it first.
And so just as you're saying that, and, you know, I joke about having 6 teenagers at home, but no, seriously, it's true. But I mean, so the emotional response to something you're describing within that sympathetic system is, hey, I'm defensive, I'm on edge, I'm stressed, I'm scattered, you know, I'm pissed off, for lack of a better word, and I'm just, you know, which I think is a pretty normal state for a lot of people day-to-day work, right? In a stressful environment, a high-pressure environment. And so recognizing those emotions is one of the ways to be like, oh, wait a second, I'm in that sympathetic circle, you know, and there's bad biophysical things that can happen if you're in that for too long.
Exactly. And I think recognizing you're in it and recognizing why you're in it is another really important part of this whole process, because understanding the trigger is going to help you deal with that when it happens again. Because what I used to do and what I've seen quite often is like people say them stressed and they go to a breathing and it might help, but it's kind of like you're not really training yourself to understand the why and then skillfully move. So yes, we don't want to live in that state because that leads to like burnout eventually. And many people will burn out, CEOs, athletes, because they're having that sympathetic drive. So we recognize the state, understand the trigger, could be a child, could be a work colleague, and then we do something about it. And this is where the skillful intent comes to navigate ourselves back into that calm, engaged state. We don't want to shut down, Phil. That's the last thing we want to do. And you've probably seen that, the freeze response. Mm-hmm. I'm sure you've seen that within the military. I've seen it within sport. Somebody gets so stressed and they get so triggered, they probably try and fight first, then they try and flee, and then they shut themselves down. And when you shut down, you're no help to your teammates, you're no help to yourself, you're no help to anyone. So we're trying to navigate yourself back into more of a ventral vagal, more of a calm, engaged side of our nervous system.
Yeah, and I'm guessing optimal performance kind of lies where the sympathetic and the ventral system kind of overlap, where I'm calm, I'm controlled, but I still have that energy and that, you know, I've got the good part of that fight or flight. But I've got the calm and focus and the psychological safety of kind of that ventral vagal system.
Yeah, you got it.
And correct me if I say some of these words crazy.
No worries.
I'm just trying to repeat you, but without the accent to still sound smart.
You sound good.
Thank you.
And you've totally got it. Performance is a hybrid state of some sympathetic drive with some vagal control. Like the brakes on, so you're in control, but you need to be mobilized. You need to be using some resources. You need some alertness. You need some of that go in order to perform. Doesn't matter what you're doing, performance requires that. If you get trapped in a state chronically, like you live in that state, that's a bad thing. Or if you can't control which state you move into, another bad thing.
So I love that you said that if you can't control what state. I think I work with a lot of people, and one of the common responses I hear typically when I first start working with them is they're like, yeah, I mean, this just triggers me. I'm just this way. I just think this way. I just respond that way. And it's almost this victim mindset of like, I can't help myself.
Yeah.
Like I lose my temper, or I get depressed. And I'm not talking about legitimate, mental health concerns here. I'm talking about folks who just are like, yeah, I'm a balloon floating in the breeze, and something really try to work them is like, actually, you're not your thoughts, you're not your emotions. You can use that, prefrontal cortex, and you can assert control. You just have to recognize it, and it takes practice. It's a muscle, and I think breathwork's, part of the key for that.
Yeah, and now we get to like the what can I do? So you recognize the state, you understand the trigger, and then you know where you want to go. And an amazing guy went on his leadership course. You may know him. Basically told me, if you want to get somewhere, you need to know where you start, and that's a big thing I took when we did your leadership course.
Person sounds like amazing. I hope we put their name in the credits.
Yeah,
but yeah,
exactly.
It's really hard to get somewhere if you don't know where you're starting from. Absolutely.
Yeah, and that's something that really stuck with me, and it's no different to when we're thinking about regulating ourselves. If I'm stressed and I want to be a bit calmer, I need to understand where my start point is. So now we're on sort of two tracks in terms of breath work in order to help regulate. The first one is what I call more of a building resiliency. It's a long-term game. This is having a daily practice of restoring normal breathing patterns and doing some kind of formal breath work every day, basically to build a strong foundation. And you can see that as money in the bank. Like, you're doing it day in, day out. And what that looks like is, okay, I understand I take 20,000 breaths per day. I'm going to make sure when I'm at rest, sleeping, or doing easy activity, low intensity, it's in through the nose, out through the nose, has a pause, and I try and make it slow and deep and quiet. That's a resiliency build. That's a resiliency play right there. So every time I think about my breathing, I do that. And I'm just building the resiliency day by day.
So that's literally, it's not even part of a morning routine or anything. You're just saying anytime you think about breathing, just go, wait a sec. Am I breathing in through the nose, out through the nose, deep and slow? You have a pause in the bottom.
You got it.
And just being conscious. And it's no, you're not counting, you're not doing anything complicated. Just, hey, close my mouth, in nice and deep, hold it, exhale, relax, sustained. Got it.
Literally, it's super simple, because many people have a dysfunctional breathing pattern at rest, at sleep, low intensity activity. So you're trying to rewire the brain to say, this is normal. In, out, pause. In, out, pause. Slow, deep, quiet. So first and foremost, we start the journey today, and we're on this pathway to make sure that we're getting as many of those breaths in that fashion. The next part is having what I'd call more of a formal practice, where you would take 3 to 5 minutes per day and you focus on your breath work. I would normally suggest for most people they focus on slow or deep breathing at this point. Normal breathing, 12 to 18 breaths per minute. We try and slow it down to around 6. The reason we do this is to then create strength in our nervous system. So it's not about balance, it's about strength and being able to move where you want to. So if you work on slow breathing, deep breathing, you'll actually start to strengthen that parasympathetic driver. You'll have a strong branch where you can say, I can go there, like my body's able to go there.
Yeah, and there's the parasympathetic driver, that's the fight or flight part, or is that not on the Venn diagram?
So the parasympathetic would be your ventral vagal.
Okay.
So that safe and calm.
So that's the social mammalian side of you. Gotcha.
Yeah. And think about it as like that rest and digest. Like, I need to make sure that I don't live my life in the stress zone. I need to pull myself back over there and start to think about, if you lay a triangle over that Venn diagram, you kind of want it to be living mostly in the safe and calm, a little bit in that sort of sympathetic and a little bit in shutdown. So it's kind of it's kind of like not a plumb triangle. It's kind of like distributed a little bit there. So you've got two resiliency plays there. Normal breathing pattern and some kind of formal breathwork pattern every day.
And for the formal breathwork pattern, you know, for someone who's listening to this, that could just be, hey, I set my watch for 3 minutes, and what do you say, deep, slow, and quiet?
Yeah, so simply, if you want to do something and you like, get a bit caught up in like counting and I'm not sure, you lie down, set your watch for 3 minutes, you focus on your breath work, you breathe in through the nose, out through the nose, and take a pause and try and make it quiet and deep. All you need to do. If your attention goes away, bring it back. And after 3 minutes, you're done. And that has been shown in the literature and the research to be a parasympathetic driver. So it basically elicits a vagus nerve response, the 10th cranial nerve. So you're very much driving to that parasympathetic branch. So really, really important that you just have a very simple breathwork practice.
And so what's that do in layman's terms? Because, I mean, I know what the 10th cranial nerve does, but other people might not know what the 10th cranial nerve does. So what's the effect?
Yeah, so think about that as the governor of your parasympathetic branch. And we spoke about when I'm stressed, my heart rate's fast, my breathing's fast, I'm getting a release of stress hormones. It's the opposite. Your breathing slows down, it gets deeper, you become a little bit more relaxed, less release of these stress hormones, you're not sweating as much if you are sweating, and heart rate variability, a big one that we've not mentioned so far, will increase. So basically you're doing the opposite. So if you think about that in the layman terms, okay, I'm spending a lot of time sympathetically driven because I'm triggered all the time. So to bring some balance back, I need to do the opposite. And that's where we talk about a strengthening, because you sort of subconsciously living your life stressed, and consciously you've got to try and pull yourself back to try and create that strengthening and bring yourself back into balance, so to speak.
Got it. So just that 3 minute drill in the morning, at night, whenever it is, just helps kind of strengthen that parasympathetic part. Just builds your almost like stress inoculation up a little bit. Is
you
that
got it.
accurate? Okay,
yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
So number one, if you think about breathing, just focus on deep, slow, and quiet through your nose, and that's just can happen any time of the day. And then you're also saying, hey, it's a good practice to carve out 3 to 5 minutes. I love that you said lying down. I already like this drill.
Yep.
Just in my head, I see where I'm doing it. But just doing 3 minutes of that, again, deep, slow, quiet breathing through my nose. You know, for folks who've heard of box breathing, or, you know, I'm a big fan of Jason Selk and some of his breathing techniques, which is inhale for 6, hold for 2, exhale for 7. Are there any major differences if people are doing like a counting thing, or is that just a forcing mechanism for intentional breath work?
Yeah, so now we're getting into like very specific breathing exercises. And when we think about, okay, I've got a condition around an inhale, an exhale, and a pause. So when we look at the science and research, we know that if we slow the breath work down, and everyone's slightly different, we have something called a resonance frequency. If we slow it down to around 6 breaths per minute, we're going to get some parasympathetic rest and digest drive. Like, that's in the research. So you think to yourself, if I'm conditioning 4 seconds, 4 seconds, 4 seconds, 4 seconds, or the 6, 7, you're slowing your breath work down. So you're going to get some drive. The other thing we understand is that if we elongate an exhale, so we breathe in and the exhale is longer, that elicits more of a parasympathetic tone. And it's very simple. Like, you breathe in, your heart rate speeds up. You breathe out, your heart rate slows down. So you're really sort of putting that brake on, so to speak. So the technicalities of like, okay, what are some of the nuances of breathing in terms of I'm going to condition? For me, it depends on the individual. So for example, if somebody's got a really poor breathing pattern, they're very, very sensitive to carbon dioxide, and we ask them to breathe in for 6, breathe out for 7, and pause for 2, that could actually trigger a sympathetic reaction where they have a panic attack. Because when you slow down the breathing so much, you increase carbon dioxide in the blood, and you start to create a little bit of stress, And if somebody's not ready for that, that drives them into a sympathetic response. So this is where, for me personally, I like to use assessment, and I like to understand an individual's tolerance before I start to prescribe certain exercises. So the restore functional breathing patterns and the lay down and just breathe in and out through your nose are very, very simple basics that everyone can do. If we get into, let's say we get into a simple technique that I feel most people can do, I would err on the side of 4 seconds in, 4 seconds out, 1 second pause, all with the nose. So you breathe in, breathe out, take a pause, 4, 4, 1. And I would start there because it's pretty moderate. It's not going to drive anyone too sort of sympathetic. It's not going to build up too much CO2. So for me, that's a good start point. I think the other exercises you mentioned there probably be more moderate to advanced.
Okay, no, that's great to know, because I think a lot of us like to fixate on, well, I have to do it this way or it doesn't work, or I have to do it that way. What I love is you're like, no, just when you think of it, breathe deep, slow, and quiet through your nose, and then spend 3 minutes, 5 minutes, morning, evening, just focused on that. And then if they really want to do extra, inhale for 4, exhale for 4, pause for 1, which I was doing while you said that, and it made me feel calmer and better. And I triggered not the crocodile, but the smarter part of me, I'm pretty sure. So, ironic, you talked about the panic part of when you really try to discipline yourself to breathe, but you're not conditioned for it. I remember we had an earlier conversation, this was about a year ago, and we were talking about, breathing during exercise. And you were encouraging me, like, hey, try to perform at a rate where you can breathe through your nose. And I would be okay until, if there's a hill or some variable. And then I would kind of get in that panic mode, and then I would turn it into a total mouth breather.
Yep.
So I've been on the receiving end of that. What about? So I have 2 questions for you. I'm gonna lay them both out so I don't forget them. Number 1, hey, something's going on. I'm my day-to-day life, and something just triggers me.
Yep.
Anger, fear, like I'm way in that sympathetic nervous system. It's fight or flight triggered.
Yep.
I got an email that just pissed me off.
Yep.
I saw a TikTok dance that just triggers whatever it is. I'm amped.
Yep.
How do I get back into that parasympathetic piece? And then the second one, just from our day-to-day life and all the distractions and all the inputs, and especially for folks in like a leadership role or striving for more, I'm amped. It's 10 at night. I need to go to bed, but I'm still hovering on that side of the Venn diagram. I'm still in a slightly triggered state. How do I get to crocodile mode where I just shut down and can totally zone out? Okay. So I'll let you answer both those, but I got them out, so now it's on you to remember.
Okay, so the first one is more like that tool in the toolbox of what do I pull out when I'm stressed, I've recognized it, and I need to get back some control. I'll give you 2 techniques, and this is where it comes down to everybody is different, and certain techniques work for certain people, and they like one. So let's work on 2. Both within the research, both peer-reviewed. First one, probably made more famous by Huberman, is the physiological sigh. So it's an inhale through the nose, hold, inhale through the nose, hold, and then a long exhale. Personally, I like to go in through the nose, hold, in through the nose, hold, and then out through the mouth. When I go out through the mouth, I'll go with control. So not like more like controlled exhale. I'll do 2, 3, maybe 4, and then I'll go back into a normal breathing pattern. So physiological sigh, very, very good for sort of bringing you back to center and bringing you back to self.
I remember you introducing that to the group when we did the adaptable leadership program last February.
Yep.
Yeah, because I was trying to remember it for some other programs we were running. I think I totally butchered it, but now I got it.
Yeah.
So it's inhale through the nose, inhale again.
Yep.
So it's kind of like double pumping your lungs, and then controlled exhale.
Yes.
And that should push you towards that parasympathetic, a little bit clearer thinking before you do something. And did you say there was 2 techniques, or was that both? Okay.
Yep. So I'll give you the other one. The other one is what we would call a 4-2-4. So it's a 4-second inhale, 2-second exhale, 4-second pause. So the key on this one is more of the pause after the exhale. That's where the science was looking at like, does an elongated pause have an influence on the nervous system? I like to do this one as in, I'll go in through the nose, I'll then just basically release through the mouth, and then hold 2, 3, 4. In through the nose, release, 2, 3, 4. I'll do 2, 3, 4 breaths and then into a normal breathing pattern. So there's 2 good techniques.
Love it. And I'll just share, something that I kind of couple with breathing now. So like I do my morning breath work, I do it in the cold plunge, and I kind of do my mindset work for the day. And when I remember, and that's the key, right? Because a lot of times we're getting triggered, we're getting emotional, we're getting into that sympathetic nervous system, but we don't realize it. We're like a frog in water being boiled slowly. And then we're there, and then we're saying and doing things that, we regret later, impulsive decisions or whatever it may be. But when I can catch myself doing that slide, when I don't want to be, I don't need to be amped. It's not fight or flight situation. I'll do breath work, and I want to try to capture what you said, the double inhale and then exhale, or the 4-2-4. But I'll do kind of my own breath work. Typically I do box breathing because it's 4x4 and I can remember it easily. And then I'll quickly go through my head, like reconnect with, okay, what do I say my purpose is? Connect and inspire, do good, push my limits. What's that look like in this situation? And if that doesn't give me clarity, because I'm usually still pretty amped and I'm continuing to breathe, then I sort of go down my list to like, okay, what are the values I want to define who I am? Like, faith, integrity, discipline, love, excellence, courage. And usually by the time I get to that list and coupled with the breath work, I've sort of come back into that parasympathetic, hey, this is the person who I want to be. This is how they would act in this situation. And I can usually execute day and night from when you're just raging out or totally deflated or stressed. Just such a game changer. I love coupling kind of that directed self-talk, and it's not fluffy woo. It's just reminding yourself like, hey, this is the best you that you strive to be. Again, there's where we're at and where we want to go. And then just the breath work is such an awesome vehicle there. So
there's 2 huge points you've hit on there. When we regulate our nervous system, breath work is not the only way. And you've spoke there about like a reinforcement of values, which is super important. Like that's taking you back in. Movement is another one. Like, do you need to shake or jump or run or move? Like, these are hugely important. And then the other thing you said about being in an ice bath, you're actually training the response. You get in an ice bath, it's a sympathetic response. It doesn't matter whether you get in an ice bath, you get a particularly bad bill from the IRS or whatever it might be, it's a sympathetic driver. You're actually training that. Getting in the ice bath, sympathetic response, I'm going to recognize it, I'm going to breathe. So you're training it. So a big part to any of these techniques is to train them. Because when things do go south, you're like, oh my God, what did he say? Like 4 up, 4 down, 2 left and 3 right. Like you're gone. Like it almost needs to be like a second.
Yeah, and then you dropped jumping around and running in there. So now I'm like totally going to be inhaling 5 times, doing burpees. Like I'm not covered yet, Mike. I'll have you on speed dial. So luckily, I know your website. I can go there. But I like what you said about the cold plunge and how it's kind of. We used to talk a lot about stress inoculation again in special operations. Like how do we get people so that they're inoculated to stress, so they can think clear, make better decisions under stress and pressure. So we would do it through extremely challenging training. Try to train harder in your fight type thing. But when you said that, I'm like thinking to myself, because I was telling you, I've got the ice bath, I can dial way down now to like in the 30s. And I'll get in there, and the initial response is like, F this. And I just want to do a somersault out of that thing. But you override and you go, no, I'm doing this for a reason. Physiologically, here's the impact. Control your breathing. It's making you mentally stronger. And you tell that panicky flight side, you shut up, go to the back of the room. I don't need you right now. And you are absolutely building that muscle. And then it is the, oh my God, this deal just dropped through, my year's shot. Okay. So now what? And you can get back to the kind of solution-focused mindset versus circling the drain, thinking about how bad it is, and shallow breathing and self-reinforcing. Love it. So I've had my stressed, amped day. I have a high-energy job. I'm leading. I'm at the front lines. I'm doing great things. And now it's like, okay, now I got to go to bed, but my mind's racing because I love what I do.
Yeah.
And so you can talk to my wife, like at night, my mind's still racing about how do we help people elicit peak performance? How do we build better leaders, purpose-driven, value-based organizations? And like it's positive, but when you're trying to like go to bed,
Yeah.
it's not positive. How do I go, all right, let's leave the sympathetic system and let's go into shutdown mode?
Yeah.
You got some hacks for that?
Yeah, so either on the couch or even in bed, go to what we would call like more of that parasympathetic breathing technique. We've spoke a lot about more like techniques that are helping to balance you one way, but obviously you can breathe to make yourself sort of amped up. So you think about, I'm just going to do a breathing technique and I'll give you two. We spoke about 4 seconds in, 4 seconds out, 1 second pause. Great technique. Like you're going to do around 6 breaths per minute. If that's not doing it for you, go 4 seconds in, 6 seconds out, 1 second pause. So it's either a 4, 4, 1 or 4, 6, 1. Do at least 6 breaths, so at least 1 minute, up to 5 minutes, and then put the mouth tape on and sleep with the mouth tape on. And I think the mouth taping piece, which has become a little bit popular now, really if we start to think about, if I breathe with my nose, and most males who are over 40, I think it's a times 7 chance that they're gonna be a mouth breather for 50% of the night. Sleep apneas and snoring, dry mouth, like these things are a sign that like that's not a good thing, and it's not gonna help you rest, and it's not gonna help you perform the next day. So mouth taping, you just get the tape, you put it on. There's different tapes out there. There's 1 or 2 that I recommend, but you put the tape on and it drives you into nasal breathing. Nasal breathing by nature is slow, it's deep, and it's quiet, and it's going to help you be more parasympathetic, more oxygen to cells and tissue, and you're going to feel more relaxed. You're kind of like in that resiliency piece right here, like you're building a bit of that, what do you call it, stress inoculation right there while you sleep. So you've got like the onboarding of the breathing, 4-4-1, 4-6-1, the mouth tape to get that 7 to 9 hours, hopefully, of sleep, and then you're good to go the next day.
Yeah, I think probably my kids would appreciate if I kept the mouth tape on during the day too. So are you talking literally like I just get some Gorilla Tape and whip it over my face?
No, please don't do that.
Okay.
So if you're gonna go down to like the easy way, you just go to like the local pharmacy, whatever it is, and you pick up the paper tape, the 3M micropore tape. You rip a tab off. You can either tape vertically or horizontal, and that's it. You're good to go. Tons and tons of tapes out there like that are specifically designed for sleep, but the 3M tape serves a good purpose. I would say if it's one of these things where you're like, oh, I'm not sure about that, sounds a bit crazy, that evening practice that we spoke about, tape your mouth while you're on the couch.
And that's like just a 3-minute,
Yep.
slow, deep,
Yep.
quiet breathing through your nose.
Yep, you got it.
Which I'm assuming if someone's laying in bed at 11 at night trying to go to sleep and they don't remember the 4-4-1, just that slow,
Correct.
deep, intentional breathing
Yep.
Should help. And not Gorilla Tape. That's good to know. Here's a question for you, because I've done this. So have you seen these different devices that like prop open your nasal
Yep.
passages, whether it's Breathe Right strips or the turbine? Thoughts on that?
Yeah, they help. So some people will have a deviated septum. So basically their nose is wonky. Maybe it's through being punched in the nose, or some people are born with one. But that means that all of a sudden you've gone from 2 airway passages to like 1.5 or even 1. So it's a bit harder. You think like you're trying to get oxygen in through like 1 versus 2. So they will open up and help get more air in. So they definitely do help.
Okay, so they can't hurt, may help you.
Yep.
I was using one, I think it's a British company called Turbine, and it was pretty invasive. Like it would go in your nostrils. They were plastic rings, and I did this half marathon on a ski. I hadn't run in a while. Felt awesome. Looked like a mountain gorilla though. So they kind of taken some pictures of me, and yeah, they definitely like popped my nostrils way out. Weren't terribly comfortable, but man, for me, maybe part of it was psychological effect, but performed way better than I had any right to. So I love it. We'll hit on this in the end, but I also, while we're here, kind of wrap it up on some of the just the breathwork piece, because this is what you do professionally. If people go to is it just Flo2Plus.com?
Yeah, you got it.
Like, how can they find out more? What kind of, like, what do you do for someone who goes, I want to elicit maximum performance? How do you make them better? Like, what do they get if they go to your site?
Yes.
Talk me through that.
So yeah, come and have a look on the site. There's some blogs and resources around breathing. I'm a scientist, so everything I do is evidence-based. And it depends on the individual. I have people come in and say, I want to manage stress a bit more, and we'll work on maybe that sort of nervous system side and more like the health and wellness. I have athletes that want to work more on the performance side, from boxers to basketball to golfers. So it really depends. And for me, what breath work is about, and I think we're finding with most things now, is can you start to tailor it to an individual versus give people like the same programming. So I think assessment's important. So I'll do assessment. And then I think curating a plan and a breathwork journey for someone is critical in order for them to have some success. And really breathwork's no different to training in the gym. You kind of have a phase where you set the foundation, you put the pieces in place, you maybe have to do a bit more than normal in order to create the adaptation. And then it's about doing enough to maintain. And it's these ebbs and flows of breath work that I find really intriguing, of thinking about how much volume, how much dose, how many minutes, what technique. Everyone's slightly different, but I think for me, that's where breath work lies in terms of tailoring it for the individual based on their goals, based on where they're currently at, and based sort of like on their current needs as well. So really important that I think we start to think about how important breath work is, how bigger impact it has on someone positively or negatively, and how we build for the individual.
So safe to say, realistically, kind of like leadership development, right? Or any skill, we can always get better. I use the example, LeBron James still practices free throws. And I think breathwork's probably the same way. I mean, I'm sure you are sometimes like, hey, I have room to improve on this.
Yep.
But if there's a leader, if there's someone who they're like, I want to explore this more from the aspect of emotional control, from just being able to be calm and perform under pressure, and then dial things up and dial them down. You know, I want to be very parasympathetic when I'm at home with my family. I want to go shut down when it's time to sleep. I can use breath as a vehicle for that. If they came to you, they articulate it as a goal. There'd be an assessment. You kind of see what's realistically doable with their pattern of life, where they're at, and then kind of tailor a program for them. If they don't go that route, if they just remember, hey, when you think of breathing, deep, slow, quiet through your nose, if you can do that anytime to sort of build that parasympathetic muscle, if you want to take it a level further, strongly recommend, hey, spend 3 more minutes in the morning, 3 minutes at night. Again, just deep, slow, quiet through the nose, lay down. I mean, it's really kind of a mindfulness practice right there at that point. I mean, that's what I see it, because I do that coupled with visualization and just setting myself up for the day, or drawing out the lessons from the day when I do it at night. And then you drop some other kind of performance techniques for, hey, if you're in that amped moment, you feel yourself triggered, or you're being called on to perform or give that presentation, and you're in flight mode or fight mode, that dual inhale through the nose, controlled exhale through the mouth. Do that a few times. Focus on what you need to do, what the next step is, and you're going to be head and shoulders above it. I love it. I think that's really tangible, hands-on stuff that anyone can take from it. You know, you've given a ton of underpinning on the science behind it, and you know, I know your site, I've been there before, is great and lays out even more. We'll put the links to that in the podcast. But something else I want to hit you up on now, because you know, I geek out on all the leadership stuff, and you've been to some of the programs. We've worked together a little bit, so you have some familiarization with it. I want to know, from all the coaches, all the athletes you've seen, different folks in business, you mentioned several well-known organizations, like, do you have a leader that just kind of stands out, like, you know, she or he was just awesome to be around and work with, and who was it and why?
Yeah. So the guy who really springs to mind is a guy called Russell Martin. He's currently the head coach of Southampton Football Club back in England. When we worked together, he was a player. So he's an athlete. This was at my time at Norwich City. He's an international. And he just had this curiosity around everything we were doing. Ask questions all the time around why this, why that, why are we doing that? And my nature's quite curious as well. And he challenged me to be better. And he actually said to me, I'm going to do this mindset course with this guy. Do you want to do it with me? And I was like, listen, like, can't really afford it. And he said, I'll pay for you. I'll take you on the journey. So he kind of like, and he was the captain of the team as well, but he was very curious, and he's gone on to be very successful at what he does now as a coach. And I still speak to him now, and I say, like, well, how are you approaching this? What do you do? What have you learned? And to him, he said, like, being humble and showing vulnerability is very, very important to him. And coming from a professional sport background, that's not common. Like, people don't show that side. They're quite aggressive. Nobody shows any weakness. Everyone's grinding. Everyone's driving forward. Everyone thinks they've got the answers. And I met this guy, and he was like, I don't know everything. I'm curious. I want to understand more. I want to develop myself and learn and continue to learn. But ultimately, he will listen to people, and he has that humility to say, I'm vulnerable as well. And I really respect the guy. And he still encourages me to be better at what I do every single day. And I'd say, yeah, he would be the leader that I'd look to and say, like standout role model leader for me.
Yeah, I love it. And the name again, was it
Russell Martin? Yeah.
Russell Martin, and he's currently the head coach of
Southampton,
which is like Southampton, but without the H.
You got it, yeah.
Okay, got it, tracking. And you said what really stood out is I love that curiosity, always looking to learn, improve, and get better, which I think is a hallmark of top performers, because if you do that long enough, notice there's no fear of failure there. You have to be humble, because you're going to trip and fall as you learn new things. I love the example of, he's like, hey, come with me on this mindset journey. You're like, yeah, I don't know. And he's like, look, I got you covered. So he kind of pushed you, but then supported you to become better. And the humility and vulnerability, I think there's this common misperception, and I'd see it in the military as well. Like the elites, the ones who are at the absolute top of the game, were some of the most humble, vulnerable. They would own their mistakes. And it wasn't self-deprecating. It wasn't false humility. It was truly like, hey, I still have more to learn. I'm like, no, you're literally the best at what you do. One of the people who just won Best Ranger in the U.S. Army, a guy named Luke Ebeling, incredible performer, humble, hungry, always learning. I mean, it sounds just like what you've described. So I love hearing those stories. And I'm sure he was a performer in his own right as a captain of a team.
Yep.
But that wasn't the first thing you said. It wasn't how good he did the skills. You said things like, he makes me better today, and just how he modeled it. So no, I appreciate you sharing that. Love it. And, take out the soccer and the sport aspect of it, and you could drop those characteristics in probably any field and be like, yeah, it's a top performing leader. She runs a sewing machine company, or she's the CFO for this, Fortune 100 company, but embodies that. Whoever's on that team is gonna be, not just love him, because you can be likable but not a great leader, but love them and learn from them, become better from them. Totally dig that. So, I'm going to ask you, because you went out and you were in the mountains and trudging through the snow and starting fire with flint and steel and flipping a kayak in the middle of February in the Pacific Northwest, and on, the city streets at night. Last February, you did the Adaptable Leader course. And other than the awesome quote, that it's really hard to get somewhere if you don't know where you're starting from, which, thank you. Yeah, what was your takeaway from doing kind of experiential learning? And you gave a lot to that program too. I want to acknowledge you brought all this to us, and even I saw several participants this week, and we were talking about it. And they, Emily was talking about still working with you on things. But what did you kind of take from that experience that that made you better?
Yeah.
And if you say nothing, we're just going to edit this out.
Don't worry.
So,
I've prepared this. Don't worry. I think first and foremost, it was to put myself in another situation, which I often do, which I was pretty uncomfortable with. I had no idea what I was doing. I didn't know you, Phil. And I was like, this guy could basically do anything. Like, I better check my life insurance. And I'm going into a situation where I could be totally exposed. Like, from a human point of view, I might not be able to keep up. I might fail. So I went into it with that in the back of my mind. And to go on the leadership course, like the big things for me were, obviously there's many different types of leaders, many different styles, but this thing of like adaptability kept coming around and around and around and around, and not getting emotionally attached with a problem and not getting your face in the problem. And it comes down to like the whole physiology thing again of like, as soon as you get that sympathetic drive and the breathing changes and the mind goes from there to there, like unless you train that or become aware of it, you kind of fall into that trap. And it still lives with me to this day of like, take a beat, step back from a problem, take a breath, and try and see the bigger picture, and don't get like in the weeds all the time. Like, I've got this, I'll sort this out. So it was a great experience for me. I still lean on the things that we learned from there around the adaptability, about showing up, about my purpose, about being the person I want to be. And it was just a great opportunity to challenge myself as well. Because quite often we sit in this comfort zone, and that's not a good place to sit, because we don't really create anything or make anything. I remember my dad always said to me, like, the person who makes no mistakes makes nothing at all.
Yeah.
And that always sat with me. I was like, okay, I'm going to try and challenge myself.
I'm going to steal that and say it was a StoneWater saying now. So,
but yeah, it was a great experience for me. To be a leader is many different things, but it showed me who I am as a leader, which I didn't know until I did that.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, it's similar to what we talked about, right? Like going in cold water to practice, getting out of that stress, fight, or flight response. Like you're doing something that's going to trigger it, so you can practice when the real time comes. And we try to replicate that, in the experiences and the expeditions. Like even when you said like, man, I felt anxiety, it was ambiguous, it was unknown. I had to kind of stick my neck out there, but it ends up becoming not just a great growth opportunity, but you maintain connections, close connections with folks from that. And it's been really cool to see that and hear about it. All right, Mike, so I've got a high-end high school volleyball game I got to go watch. My daughter's last for the season, so I'm heading out there. I don't know if I'm going to have time to tell her about the Breathwork before she gets up to serve, but hopefully I'll try to at least sign it to her on the sidelines. But getting into the habit, there's another person I work with who suggested we do this. I want to ask you a question that you can ask our incoming guest. And I told you it's Dustin Diefendorfer with Mountain Tough, so he is all about preparing men and women to go in the backcountry or special operations or really challenging physical environments and do really hard things. So he loves the concept of stress inoculation. He also has a righteous beard that would put both ours to shame, and he practices what he preaches. He's built this business from scratch, and it's amazing. It literally changes lives. And full disclosure, I do some mental toughness work with that team, but Montana, backcountry hunter, push physical limits to the extreme. Great leader, built this awesome company that's impacting thousands of lives. What's a question you would want me to ask him when I talk to him here in a few weeks?
So I would ask him, how does he build resiliency of body and mind, and then how does he regulate himself in the moment?
He would love both those questions. So I've got a good idea how he'll say he builds resiliency in body and mind, but the regulation's a really cool concept because he is flatline. Like even when you talk to him, he's I go from about a 9 to about a 2, like highs and lows. He's about from a 4.5 to a 5.5, like just very even, whatever the situation. And I've seen him in some fairly intense ones, and he's just like half smile and just rolls with it. So I'm excited. I'll ask him what he does for resiliency in body and mind. Good idea what he's going to say for body. And then I'll ask him, how do you regulate yourself when you're in that intense circumstance? I think it's fair to say. All right. I love it. And I know he's actually checked out some of your stuff too. So we'll probably talk a bit about you as we get things teed up. Mike, I really appreciate the time, and I learned a ton. I enjoyed it, and look forward to working with you going forward.
Yeah, thanks, Phil.
All right, man. Appreciate
Thank you.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Dude, that was awesome, man.
Awesome. Thank you.
Wow.